This can't be fixed. Worthless. Junk. Oh well. Time for some modding.
Longest Jake here with a mod video and internals guide on the Busby Revolution. This blaster here is one that I personally think is the best that Busby has put out in the mag-fed, spring-powered pistol form factor. It is quite powerful in stock form, and this is actually my second one. I happened to find one at my local Roses. This is the one that David Bolak sent to me, which I absolutely fell in love with the design. It's great for an adult hand. As you can see here, there is the bottom of the grip. And I wear, again, XL to 2XL size gloves. That's how I'm going to base my hand size. And I have plenty to grab. This pistol feels like it was made for an adult. And that is something that is hard to find. And the top prime, smooth. And you can hear that. That has very nice power. It is completely compatible with every dart, every magazine, including drums. So that's a huge plus all around. Fantastic ergonomics, hits almost 90 feet per second stock, and I now can verify that. This one was hitting way up there, and I almost thought that I had just a really good example. The second one here that I picked up, and I just stumbled into it. I was in my local Roses, of all places, and there was just one sitting out on a shelf randomly. So I took it as fate and grabbed it. They have them for $10, so I never expected to be able to get one in person, but I stumbled into one. So, okay, grabbed it, said I'm going to tear this thing down and modify it. The one that David sent me, I'm going to keep as its own. Now, I have already opened it up, as you can see, so I can speed through a little bit without having to feel rushed, because you guys know I like to chit-chat, because this is something I enjoy. Well, I pulled it apart, and a couple of little key notes that I want to go over. You'll take a small flathead screwdriver, and you will need to do this before you start taking all the screws out. Pop off the little grip insert, and I did it from the bottom. It was easy to do that way. It released the little clipped in piece, and I was able to pivot it up and out. There are 2 screws underneath. Now, some important information. Some important information is that all the screws are the same size that are in the shell. I counted a total of 7 here. These are all of them. So not a whole lot holding this together. You will need to remove the top rail, which has 2 screws itself. I actually left them in. It comes apart in a clamshell itself, so it'd be great for painting and custom builds. The top prime itself also has 2 screws, and it has a insert clicked over. That's the little grip part. It does not cover any screws. The screws are easily accessible, but you do have to remove that grip portion in order to pop the 2 halves apart and set them aside to be able to get the shell off. So far so good. We had 7 screws in the shell, 2 in the rail, 2 in the top prime handle, so a total of 11 for the entire blaster, and you're able to get into it. Now, as usual, Busby did have a solvent welded front piece. However, this was not very heavily solvent welded, and my trick was to take that flathead, and I went down inside the shell, and I just forced it in between the blue of the shell and the orange of the tip. And then once in, I pivoted the screwdriver, and I heard the solvent weld pop. I did it gently, just as a testing, because some of them are very heavily solvent welded on some other models. But it just popped free. So I went to the other side, popped it free, and sure enough, it slid right off. And you can see there's just a little dab here, here. Looks like they barely did it. But this allows us to go ahead and get into the blaster. And again, we have, as you can see here, I'll use this to point out, you have little pegs that have been inserted into the shell and solvent welded in place. I typically drill them out. What those are doing is holding in these panels. This is a separate panel. This is a separate panel. Again, that's part of the fantastic Busby color schemes, is that they do not use paint. They use separate panels that have been put in place. This one looks like it has 1, 2, 3, 4 pegs. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So a small screwdriver, if you were going to punch it, or a drill bit and gently drill it out. That's my method, is to gently drill it out from the backside and then paint it if you want at that point. I've done that on a number of Busby blasters, and that technique works pretty well. Getting into the guts of the blaster. Now, with my experience with Busby blasters, this is your locks. It's a different design than typically. They had used a smaller box. This one's longer, but that's basically the same thing. You have your magazine catch here and the release button with a very hefty spring there. Of course, your trigger assembly, which reaches forward and reaches all the way to the dart tooth releasing point, and that is on the dart tooth, as always, is on a I'm forgetting the term for that spring, but it's a rotating spring. Don't lose it. Don't lose this peg. Be careful of that. And it has the little pressure point that, again, I do not know the term for this thing because Busby's the one that does this. Nerf doesn't do this. This little piece here, it's kind of like a dart gate, but it keeps downward pressure on the darts in the magazine to help them feed smoother, and that's part of why Busby blasters don't really need jam doors like certain brands always do. And of course, we got the nice heavy-duty Busby catch mechanism back here that rarely needs upgraded. We'll see. The way it's designed, it doesn't rely on its pressure from this small spring, because it is a much more functionally sound design than the Nerf catch. That's not me being preferential because I like Busby. It's just, it's a better engineered design. Much more tolerant of spring loads, much less reliant on friction, and it can take a huge beating over time instead of having to upgrade to metal, which at some point, you know, I want to actually take one of these plastic catches, go to a machine shop, and have them make a whole bunch of metal ones for me, just for true major durability. We're going to go ahead and pull out our breech and plunger tube assembly. That is the one-piece breech and plunger tube with the very typical Busby slightly oversized dart post there. And then here in the back, we're actually going to go ahead and start working on this. One of the techniques to start opening it up, take a slightly larger flathead, get in behind the back of the plunger tube, and just twist your screwdriver. Twist it sideways. If you look down in there, get this piece out. This little piece is back there. It's at the front of the plunger tube, and it is what holds the spring for the air restrictor, and it's sitting on 3 pegs. One this way, one this way, one this way. And all I do is take my flathead screwdriver, put it in between the gap between the outer perimeter of the plunger tube to this little cap, and I am prying either clockwise or counterclockwise, and it will break free. And then out comes the spring, lost forever, and not the cleanest one I've ever done. Sometimes you can get the air restrictor to actually just fall out, but let's see if I can get it to come past. If not, you can always just hit it a couple times, and we can break this free. Like I said, this is an internals and mod guide all in one. Now, a lot of you guys said that you'd prefer the real-time guide, so we're just going to do this as we go. There goes the dart post. Keep our good parts over here. Put our throwaway parts on the other side. And yes, that is a brass tube there. See if it's even it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a brass tube. This is going to get brassed. For now, I've got a 7 kilogram spring up there. That's just what I happen to have in stock. I've got about over a dozen of those, because I typically don't need anything else but 7 kilogram. It gets you up into the 125-ish area. I've had some of these blasters that I build hit 135, 140, but I don't need beyond that. Not yet. I will for next season. And blasters like this one here that I'm building, I will upgrade to a 9 kilogram. And that's going to be fantastic. That should push it up to the 150 mark. But that's the goal, is I want to have a number of 150 to 175 foot per second blasters. There we go. Now, if you were just doing a simple build, and you just wanted to, if you were just doing a simple build and you just wanted to remove the air restrictor, that's done. I've done it already. We're nice and clear. You'll see a little bit of jagged plastic down there. But it's pretty clear, as you can see from both sides. This just opened up the airflow completely. So that is something to do. I'm going to leave that in real time with me actually working on that, so you know how long it takes. Now, we have our plunger rod and stock spring. And that's still clean in there because I haven't drilled yet. That seal, I'm testing the seal. This one's a bit loose. So it hitting that high stock is really, really surprising, because that's not the tightest seal ever. Some of this I'll probably do off screen when I do the hot gluing, because I'm going to hot glue. There's a decent amount of dead space there, as you can see. Well, let's just use my pinky finger. There's a decent amount if you look compared to how far in my finger goes. I will fill that, and I'm going to clean it all off. I'll E-tape underneath the O-ring, and I'll fill that, but I'll do that part off screen so you guys don't have to suffer through. Now, looking at the front portion of the blaster, here is your dart tooth, and it has we'll say a dart tooth gate that gets pulled back by the trigger. When you pull the trigger back, it allows the dart tooth to go forward, and then it pulls down because it's spring loaded, and then when you let go of the trigger, it pushes the dart tooth back up. And this of course just keeps the darts down in the magazine for the breech to scoop them up. Very nice design overall. I'm gonna have to reattach that spring, and I'll do that towards the end and show you guys what it takes to do that. If you're modifying this, you don't need to take this out. The catch mechanism can stay in place. There's no need to remove it. One thing we do need to remove is the lock mechanism. Don't necessarily throw it away, because there's springs inside of it, and those springs can be used to upgrade other blasters' catch mechanisms and whatnot. You know, there's other brands of blasters aren't quite designed with the extra room to play on their springs, and they need upgraded. Then if you're looking to modify a Nerf blaster, sometimes, like on the catch spring, if it doesn't catch quite good enough, you can just throw in some of these Busby lock springs, and that's one area where I've had luck with nesting. You can throw in a Busby lock spring to nest into the standard catch spring, and sometimes it's just enough to get it to catch reliably. Now, what I just pulled out, oh, and by the way, you also have plenty of screws in there. So if you strip a screw out of another shell, Busby locks are actually little assemblies with springs and screws. Save them. Do not throw this piece away. That's my throwaway pile. This is my keep. That'll go into my spare parts bin, and I a lot of times will take those apart and use them. So now you're left with this. You don't need to do anything else. This is ready to accept higher springs and your modified plunger tube and plunger rod. Now this part, like I said, I will be doing off screen. There's no need for me to really show that, because all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take the O-ring off. I'm going to actually wash the plunger rod. I'm going hot water, soap, clean it up really, really good so that the E-tape will stick. And then I'll E-tape it a couple times, a couple wraps, and then I'll put the O-ring back on. But before I put the O-ring back on, I'm going to hot glue in here. And then once that seal's put back on, I'll re-lubricate it and it'll be ready to go. But I will show you what I'm going to do next to the breech, which is going to be, I'm going to drill it out and I will put a simple brass breech in here to improve the seal through the contact point on the blaster to the dart. But that'll be next. Okay, coming back now after my little off-camera work is done with the plunger rod. I have put 2 wraps of E-tape underneath the seal. I have tested it, which once you remove the air restrictor, it's actually very easy to test. Just put a dart fully inserted into the breech and test the seal by gently, I've already got a little bit of relubrication done, and just gently fire it off. Okay, another way to test is also to load the dart and then pull in reverse. Like one thing for sure is I like to see the breech and plunger tube assembly be able to hold itself vertically while I shake it. It's not a scientific way, but it's my way. And then you pull against it, and if you get a good amount of suction, that's a lot of pull actually. Made me lose my grip on it. But very nice seal now. I am going to take the time to note something that I found off camera while doing my work on the assembly here. There is actually a small hole. Let's make sure we're going in clear. There's actually a small hole right there on the side of the back end of the breech where it meets the plunger tube. That is shocking because Busby doesn't normally do that. And that makes the stock performance even more astounding. Because keep in mind, they've done this intentionally back here, because the air restrictor, I have actually already put marks. I've been doing some measuring off camera. Right here is where the air restrictor is. If you can see my pencil mark on the side of the plastic there, that's behind. So that is actually a vent to reduce the amount of airflow going into. It's probably like it probably is to help. I'm thinking of an engineering standpoint. It's probably to help relieve pressure if there's not a dart chambered and the air restrictor is engaged. That's probably how it vents off a little bit quicker instead of sitting there, you know, with the. If it had a really, really perfect seal, the plunger rod would be sitting there under pressure if it didn't vent off air. And it probably just allows it to do that. But of course, if we're going to mod this thing for performance, a little bit of hot glue, just kind of go almost as if you're welding, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, which I did. I wrapped it I did this big of a bead right there. It's actually hard to see, but you should be able to see that. I put a bead of hot glue there, which will seal it up. Be more than enough. Now, to do the main heart and soul of this, I'm going to show you why I'm going to brass it, and I'm going to do my version of a simple, some people call it the lazy breech. I just call it a simple trumpeted breech. At some point I might coin a term like the Mongoose Jake simple trumpet breech. And the reason I call it that is it will get a trumpet flare at the end, and it's just going to be a straight breech, as in it'll go in, and I'm not going to align it like some people will take and make their brass actually contour to the outline of this. No. I'm not going to do that. It's just going to go back in here, be trumpeted for easy feeding so it doesn't cut the dart. And here's why you gain so much performance just by a little bit of brass. I've already made marks. This is to help us out and speed it up the process. And I hope you guys enjoy this in-depth part of it, because this is me. This is my thought process. This is how I would like to explain things. I left in enough of, if you look down in there, I left enough of the plastic ridges. They're going to get drilled out, but I left enough of them in there to make the dart stop where the air restrictor would be. But let's find out where this thing contacts the original breech. Because remember, this whole thing is not a contact point. Busby's not as bad as Nerf. Like sometimes Nerf contact points are only like that big, which is pathetic. Go back to my video on the Ruckus and you'll see a really, really bad example. That blaster is horrendous from an engineering standpoint in all ways, shapes, and forms. it's a waste of money. Unless somebody just really likes the looks of it. But functionally, it's terrible. We're going to take a look at the Busby breech. Busby blasters hit higher performance, stock form. Part of it is a elongated contact point. We're going to take a look. You already see the marks. It's kind of a cheat sheet now. But dropping it in, where does it hit? Okay, my first mark there is where the dart actually fell and hit where the breech starts to restrict a little bit. And that's where it's actually going to squish the dart and get a good air seal. So it falls down to there. Now, how far do you have to push it to hit where those jagged edges of the remnants of the air restrictor are? Of course, again, you see my cheat sheet. There. I double checked it. The back of the dart hits where the air restrictor is right here. Now, if I pull it out, you'll even see that. Those marks on the dart show, boom, right there. That is where the air restrictor was originally. Now, of course, it's gone, but fall in, it falls down to that point, and then you get that much contact with the dart, which means, looking at it, I've already measured it. It's approximately 14 or 15 millimeters, to be precise, which equates out to be about 11/16ths of an inch, roughly, because right here is the 3/4 mark. It's either 11/16ths to 3/4. It's roughly in there. If you want to say, let's see, 3/4 would equate to be 24 30-seconds. So it's probably more, if you want to get really accurate, it's probably about 23 30-seconds. That would be the contact point of the dart. Getting carried away. But in my line of work I'm in now, I have to be accurate with monuments and sculpting. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that, we're going to say, for rough reference, that 3/4 inch contact point, and I want to turn it into a nearly full contact point. Now, this breech is not going to stick out. These notches are here to allow easy and smooth feeding for magazines. So you don't want to push past this. Now you can push back and give a good shot from the plunger tube into the end of the breech, and that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to actually do this right here. I am going to roughly make the breech. If I'm actually looking into reference where that hit would be, and I'm going to drill this out. Now, I have a special drill bit I bought from Amazon. This is exactly the size of my 17 30-seconds brass. Now, you can also use 9/16ths, which would be the equivalent of 18 30-seconds, for a little bit of a looser, more tolerant fit to some very tight darts. But I want the 17 30-seconds because while I'm doing a 7-kilogram build now, eventually these are going to be 9-kilogram builds. I'm going to interchange and swap out the 7-kilogram springs for 9 kilograms. And the tighter the brass, the better the air seal, the better performance you're going to get out of higher spring loads. 9/16ths might be better actually for the 7-kilogram springs. It might be. I don't know. I'll have to make a test of that. But first off, it's time to drill this out. So we'll scoot this aside and drill this. Don't need to show this. You guys know what a drill is. Okay, now drilling work has been done on the breech. I actually need to go ahead and clean it out, which I'm showing this because make sure you clean out your plunger tube. I think most people who are going to be attempting this mod would be mindful to do it, but just so that you are, remember to get all the plastic shavings out of your plunger tube and the breech itself. So now, remember there was all those jagged edges from the air restrictor that had been in there? Well, now it looks nice and clean. There's both ends. Clean shot straight through. Now, you can do a few things. You can do a dead space remover. If you're only going to put the breech down to, say, here, well, if you look in the plunger tube, you've got this much gap from, if I was going to put a breech that stopped here, well, there's this much gap. Well, you can insert, a smaller diameter brass. You could have the breech go all the way back here and put tapered sections of brass into it to kind of help speed up the velocity of the air coming out of the plunger tube. But I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not looking for supreme efficiency. I just want better than stock efficiency. If I can do that, I'm happy. And that's what we're going for. Now, it's the determination of the length of the brass now that I am looking at. Let's move a couple things around. And that's what you have to decide. Now, I have test fit it. I have drilled that. And by the way, the drill bit was under $4 on Amazon. So, fantastic. All you have to do is search up a 17/32 drill bit. Find it. I think I paid $3.50 Fantastic. It's a must-have product for anybody who is going to do custom breeches. Very simple. Buy the 17/32 bit for under $4. It had prime shipping even, and I've been using it to death. But we're going to determine how much we need. Now remember, I made the marks on a dart. This is important to do because this shows where the dart originally would be. Because now, well, that dart will fall all the way through. It's a sign of it's nice and cleanly drilled. But now I can use that to understand, okay, my dart went that far back in. So for it to feed properly out of the magazine and fire, I don't need to take, and again, I've wiped off my mark on the breech, and it's important to kind of do this. Let's mark that real quick again. I don't actually need my brass to go back past this if I don't want. If I wanted to be really stingy with my brass, I could cut it right there. I could cut it right here, flare it out, and be done. I'm not going to do that though. I want to push it back all the way. And that's just me wanting a really, really nice clean airflow. So we're going to push this all the way back in. Now I want it to stop in the orange right here. I'm going to just using that as a guide. So what I'm going to do is, yes, I do keep my brass in the package until I really, really got to use it. I'm going to go and let's see if I can mark that. Okay, that's my mark. We'll set the breech aside. And we're going to open up our tube cutter. Place it in. My cutter is a bit old, but it still does the job. So now I'm going to take my mark, line it up with the blade, and then rotate it around. Now I've got it scored. Go around and around and around. You tighten a little bit as you go. There we go. Around and around and around we go. Tighten it a little bit. Tighten it. And freshly cut piece of brass. Now, of course, be careful. The end's going to be quite sharp. And this end, as you cut it, it squishes down. Now this end is already squished very nicely, and that actually will prevent the dart from popping through there. See, the dart won't feed into it, which means also it'll have a hard time if it were to get vacuum loaded. That will help stop that. Now you can take a pair of needle nose pliers and bend that down in further to prevent it from vacuum loading. And what that is that when this breech is here, it's going to have such a good air seal that if you already have a dart loaded and you go to reprime the blaster again, well, it'll suck the dart out of the breech, boom, straight into the plunger tube. And now you got to disassemble your blaster all the way apart to remove that dart, which you got to reprime it, you're going to feel it, and you've just crushed it in there and you're done. And if that was the only blaster you brought for you and you went to an out-of-town event, you're out of luck. Not speaking from a personal experience, but that would be worst case scenario. But I'm going to leave this end, let's see, yeah, plus that's kind of the uglier end. It's got a good crimp to it, and it's kind of ugly because it's been beat up a little bit. So I'm going to trumpet flare this one. And the other end of this, or you can use other things, but my cutter has this tool integrated into it, so I'm going to make use of it. And all I have to do is push that down in, and it will flare out. Another thing you can use is the end of needle nose pliers. My needle nose pliers are on another workbench across the garage, so we're going to do it with this. And this actually does a really nice job. You just flare it out, and this does a really good job because it has also a edge to it that trims a bevel into this. And you can probably see, let me hit the camera here real quick. Yeah, you can actually see the shine. That shine is a bevel edge on the brass itself. Okay, quick cut to admit that I did go across, and I went further with my tool here, and I went and put more of a bevel, and then I went across my garage to my other workbench, grabbed my needle nose pliers, because look at that trumpet. It's hard for me to pick up here on this, but that is really flared out like a horn, and that makes the darts feed so nicely. As you can see, they can come in even slightly angled and not get snagged and cut by the brass. That's important, because otherwise, if you do this wrong, you can cause it to be a very sharp edge, which will just slice and dice and mutilate your darts. However, this one is not, and it's actually ready to slide in there. Now, you can put something on this, such as epoxy, glue, and put it in place. However, I didn't go to town crazily drilling. I drilled it enough that it's going to be a very snug press fit. Like, I'll actually take the back end of a screwdriver to press against this and get it in, or the needle nose pliers. But I'll just push it in, and then I have this pair here, has hard plastic. It won't damage the brass, and it won't damage the screwdriver or anything else. But you just gotta push it in and keep pushing. There. And we now have a snug fit there. The trumpet flares out, and you can see it's actually stressing the plastic just a little bit, but that's okay. There's not going to be any movement there. And now that plastic will actually hold it solid. And looking through, we've got a nice, you can actually see that shine from the brass there. That, to me, that's very, very pretty. But nice firm fit. It'll be able to feed solidly, and that fit will allow it to achieve a great air seal. And it is both short dart and full length compatible. But now it's time to actually reassemble it, and I'm going to use a little bit of the worker lubricant. Just put a little bit. I like the Orange ModWorks one as well, but this is a really light lubricant that Worker sends with their spring kits, and I got so much of it I need to use it. I bought so many of their spring kits that I have, I think I have like 10 or 15 of these little things sitting around. So time to use it. And I only have like three or four tubes of the Orange ModWorks stuff, and I don't know when the next time I'm going to buy that. I've got one kit from Orange ModWorks to do that, thanks to the patrons. Of course, I ordered this back before I got hurt. I have a kit to install into a clear strong arm, and that was before I got hurt, so that would have been paid, at least the majority of that kit price was paid by a patron, which at the time, the only one was Patrick, which is Homely665. He made it possible for me to get that. And yes, I am really going crazy on the lubricant. Perfect. I'm going to do a little test fit. Test that in. Nice. Nice. I always like that. Now, let's put this worker lubricant off to the side. And it's time to put it back together. Now, I said I would go over how to redo this spring on this torsion spring. Came to me just now. The torsion spring. on Busby blasters. The torsion spring is an ingenious thing. However, it's hard to find replacements because nobody really carries these. You can buy Nerf catch springs from NF Strike, from Monkey Mods at different places. I think Out of Darts has them on his web store. But this little torsion spring is fantastic. Their dart tooth is a simple design. And if you were to do a sealed breech, it's easy to get rid of, easy to move. But here's how it's supposed to be installed. Yikes, my camera's not wanting to focus on it. Oh well. There's a little notched end, and then there's one little end that sticks way out. Right there is the end that sticks way out. That hits the shell. This other end, let's just pull it off. This other little itty bitty end right there, that hooks on the dart tooth just like that. And then you take this, slide it onto the rod and down to where that other end sticks further out, which if you're messing around with yours, you'll know what I'm talking about. It catches a tab on the shell. That's how you reinstall that. If it ever pops off for some reason, just make sure the rod's in place first. Hook it looks like a really sharp squared off C. Hook that onto the dart tooth itself, and then make sure you allow the longer arm to catch the shell. It's how most all Busby blasters work here over the most recent time. And then you push this up, allow the gate to move underneath. It holds the dart tooth in place, which means you have to wiggle the trigger and the trigger spring into place, and now you're set. So now we're going to set this down. Now that I went ahead and put that back in place, we're going to get out our NF Strike 7 kilogram retaliator spring, because just like all current and recent Busby blasters, outside of a couple of very little pistols, that's a retaliator spring. Quite simple. Busby not only made their blasters cross-compatible with the darts and the magazines, they also made it compatible with the springs. And if that was intentional, which I'm betting it was, that was insanely smart of them. And I do think it was intentional. And now you'll take one of these ends, shove it over the plunger rod supports that hook to the plunger head, because of course it is a one-piece unit. Slide all of that into the back end of the plunger tube and hook it. It's going to require a little bit of force. Force it onto the support for the catch. We're going to slide that down and in. Now here's where there's a little bit of work. You have to slide everything into place all at once. Hold your plunger tube. Let's lift up our guide. Put that in place. Allow the plunger tube to go forward. There's the dart tooth. Plunger tube's in place. We have everything lined up. It's in the catch guide. Trigger's in place and down in its groove. We're going to hold that down. Then we're going to take our shell, slap it back on, make sure everything stayed in. Oh, trigger popped up. I knew I heard something. Okay, and if I don't bump anything, it should all stay in place. The main thing is I do need to take a look and guide that dart tooth rod without bumping the trigger. That is the thing. It will pop up. And don't worry if you do it. I do it every single time myself. The rod has to fit into the shell there. Everything locked in. Make sure that the shell halves go together without binding, and sometimes you're going to have to push this down. Looks like everything went together pretty nicely. There we go. If you have to, If there is a point that snags, a lot of times it's going to be this guide or its spring. Just take a screwdriver, reach back in there, flick it down, and now my shell's back together. I will actually tighten everything up, and we'll come back with a test. Okay, I have 8 shots loaded into the included magazine. It's a mix of AccuStrike copies and got the Mengun style darts, got some E-kind waffles, so it's a mix of what most people would be running. And we're gonna try this out. I fired a few shots, it cycles nicely, and we're going to fire it. This is actually a fairly centered barrel exit, so even though it's a faux barrel, it's actually fairly centered up. 133.7. 117.9. Not going to count it. It says 759. That's obviously an error. Got a low one of 108. There we go. Got 111. $609.6. And another error. Let's throw in a few good darts and see what we can do. Okay, this is my chrono testing. Precise Pros, they've seen some use. Got about 110. It's actually 108.4 exactly. Make sure my camera's still going. There we go. Okay, that one there, one of those two is going to have an issue. Okay, Precise Pro's actually getting some wear there. That was the 108 shot one. This one here fired out at 148.2. I am starting to see finally, after 2 solid years of use, some of my Precise Pros are starting to wear out or blow the tips off. Oh, and I think everybody's seen that one. Poor marksmanship. Let's throw a couple more back in. So I should have 3 here. Let's find out if that 148 was a fluke or if that's what to expect if I run Precise Pros. Man, error. 123.2, and one more. 119.6. Okay, confirms everything that I would expect. The blaster itself, after this, with a 7 kilogram spring, is going to be running from, you'd say, with bad darts down to 110, and with good darts all the way up into around the 130 to 140 range, which is pretty consistent for my brass breech 7 kilogram Busby builds. So, no exception to the rule, but it's still a very, very good blaster for what I intend to use it for some local events. So if you run into me, if I'm still running a 7 kilogram spring, this is what I'll be using. Is this, or a Reaper, or Tactical Storm, or my Interceptor, or Thermal Hunter, or Snipe. They all run, this is my typical setup for my primary. I'm not a high velocity guy, but I'm going to bump a couple of these up to 9 kilograms. We'll see what the gain is. But for now, with a 7 kilogram build, brass breech, air restrictor removed, lock removal, dead space removal, all the things that you would come to expect if you watch one of my mods, the Revolution is quite capable of hitting up into the 130s, as we've seen. 148.2 was the high recorded. That's not the average. The average would be more around 125 to 130. And that's a fairly nice build for, as you see, a short evening with me in the workshop here. This is Manga Shake. I hope you enjoyed this. This is going to end up being a very long video, and I hope you don't mind that. I hope you actually enjoy the thoroughness of the modding and me showing everything. But there's the Revolution and what it can do on just something as simple as a 7 kilogram spring, a little bit of brass work, and some tinkering with your hands. This is Manga Shake. Hope you enjoyed this.